All right, we're ready for some more spooks. We're ready for some more tongue-in-cheek, satanic-ish pop metal goodies, right? Right? Imperia by Ghost. I have to say Imperia with Imperia because it's all in caps. Yeah, Ghost. Let's talk about Ghost. For those of you that don't know, Ghost is a Swedish metal band. I guess now they're more in the line of like pop metal. This is their fifth studio album, and I fell in love with Ghost with their 2015 release of Meliora. I've subsequently gone back and listened to their other albums. Prequel, the fourth album, saw the band kind of shift gears slightly. Since like from Meliora back, they were more of like this gothic rock, gothic metal band, very tongue-in-cheek, very fun. That was kind of the whole mythos, and part of the appeal of Ghost was like the changeover of the lead persona, having like almost like this religious aspect to it, where one lead person would either die or get booted out or whatnot and have another person come in. It's all the same guy. He's just changing up the wardrobe kind of thing. This is usually heralded with a bunch of YouTube campaigns, a lot of like social media stuff to get people hyped for the new record. I mean, my favorite one was the changeover from the lead guy from Meliora to Prequel, being like a little bit more of a younger audience, being a little bit more on the sexy side of things. And that was kind of Prequel's feeling of it. It was a lot more glitzy, a lot more polished. Gone were the darker overtones of Ghost and a lot more of the fun aspects. We had a lot more of this power drive to it. And that kind of shift between Meliora to Prequel has continued with pretty much the same amount from Prequel to Imperia. And so where Prequel's like very loose concept was all about plagues, was all about like sicknesses and death, Imperia is more on like the rise and fall of empires, how people buy into them, how people eventually fall in love with them, start to distrust them, and then eventually eat themselves out from the inside. And the musical shift has continued with this as well. There's a lot more shine, there's a lot more bright, a lot more colors. And in some cases, this kind of works. And one of the things that really does stand out for me for this album is how catchy some of the harmonizations are found within this. This is found on the second track of, and you know me with butchering names, here we go, Cassarion. The second track of Cassarion, the very like everything set in like a major note sequence. It reminds me of something that like Between the Buried and Me would do with like technical death metal, but these guys are doing it with more tongue-in-cheek, fun power metal. But it's the harmonizations and the catchiness of the tracks. And this is also found within my favorite track of Watcher in the Skies, not to be confused of the Genesis classic of Watcher of the Skies. This is by far my favorite track off of the album Watcher in the Skies. It's one of the longer tracks on here. And again, it's the blending of the musical styles as well as the harmonizations. One of the best parts about Watcher in the Skies is the musicianship, the instrumentals that are found within this, the guitar work blended with the keyboards within the second half of this track. It's reminding me of some of the better parts on Prequel. And that was one of the things that I have subsequently gone back and really enjoyed Prequel because. But unfortunately, that's kind of where my praises of this album start and end. The couple of big singles on this, Call Me Little Sunshine, Hunter's Moon, and 20s, they're all, to put it mildly, not great, especially when we're coming to a legacy band like Ghost. With Ghost having that, we're expecting a little bit in the tongue-in-cheek and especially in the fun, happy fun times category, but especially within 20s, it's just bad. At least with Call Me a Little Sunshine, we still have a little bit of the nod and homages to some of the creepier aspects like Call Me Mistopheles, Call Me a Little Miss Sunshine, and that's blended very well with the music that's around it. And I would see this being brilliantly showcased in a live setting, kind of like and this is kind of like an overall feeling of the album, is like arena rock, you know, like the mid 80s with bands like Asia, where, you know, you've got this really big, powerful sound. Unfortunately, the mixing doesn't do any justice for this as well. Like, it's very muddled, it's very flat in that case. So I can see this being produced very, very well in a live setting. Unfortunately, Hunter's Moon, again, being a song for a soundtrack for the Halloween album or movie, I believe, not the latest one, but like the other one. That's what I can remember of this. It's fine, but as it stands in a runtime of an album outside of a soundtrack, it does stick out a little bit like a sore thumb. Now, I already mentioned a little bit about 20s and how it's not great. At least what it has going for it is it has some really interesting like rhythm sections. I like how it opens up with this really bombastic, very prominent, almost horn section. And I was like, ooh, they had horns from Prequel, and, you know, pretty great string section and really interesting experiments from Meliora. Maybe they're infusing some of that here, but unfortunately, once we get into the actual song proper, I don't know what the lead singer is trying to do with the dun 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 dun. It just, I don't know, it doesn't quite work exactly on here. Like, I like that they tried something a little bit on the newer side, and I think one of the things that I do like about this track in particular is how different it is from all the tracks around it. But, yeah. And I will actually say that I do like how this album is structured as well. It opens with Imperium, and about halfway through, you do have Dominion being the halfway mark. So, I mean, I will most likely pick it up in physical format. That's not a spoiler for the rating of this, but you can clearly see where the halfway mark is on this, right? You've got Imperium, Kazarian, Spillways, Call Me Little Sunshine, Hunter's Moon, and then Watcher in the Sky being the first half, and then the second half being Dominion, 20s, Darkness at the Heart of My Love, Griftwood, Bites of Passage, and Respite of the Spitalfields, or it might be Respite. I pronounce it Respite, but I know a lot of people are like, it's Respite, which actually would make sense in the conventional naming of this, because it's Respite on the Spitalfield, right? But anyway, I digress. I like how this album is very well structured. So the only track that I didn't talk about from the first half is Spillways. And this is another one that is like made perfectly for a very large arena rock. And I think that's the best way to put it. Like, it's giving me this like Motley Crue flavor to it, like the late 80s, early 90s hair metal aspect of it, which is not something I would attribute to Ghost when I first started listening to them. But it has this big sound, but unfortunately, once again, the mixing does muddle it down quite a bit. I still really like the percussive aspect of the piano work that's found on this. It reminds me a little bit of like a Supertramp piano work. So yeah, that's the first half. Second half, I've barely even touched upon, because unfortunately, even with all of that I've said, this album is very front heavy. Like, the tracks on the second half, I've already mentioned 20s. Darkness at the Heart of My Love is a really, really cheesy ballad that I just can't get a hold of. It's like, you can just picture the guy sitting on a bar stool singing this with like very little lights going on, with some of the guitar works kind of just there in the background, like some of the faceless ghouls being there. Driftwood tries to pick up the pace, but I think because it's been like knocked at the knees essentially with 20s and Darkness at the Heart of My Love, it doesn't really have quite the get up and go, and it does feel like a very stereotypical Ghost track from this album. I will admit, I like the darker parts from the second last track of Bite of Passage. It does kind of remind me a little bit of the Dream Theater Rite of Passage track, but with this one, again, it's got a little bit more of the spooks behind it, got a little bit more of the haunted, you know, kind of cheesy haunted house aspects of it. But really, at the end of the day, it just serves to be a launching point for Respite on the Spitalfield, or Respite, don't at me. And it does a fairly good job of opening this track up. I just wish that this track, because it is the longest track, even if you fold in Bite of Passage, I do wish that there was a little bit more teeth on this ending track. Like, Ghost is great at ending an album, and I just feel with this track, it kind of falls a little bit on its face. It is the best part of the second half of the album by a far margin, but it just feels like the buildups don't lead to anything. And this is something that, again, I've said before, but I can see this being played extremely well in a live venue. But at a home theater, sitting in your living room, there leaves so much to the imagination. Especially with that last play out, like we've got this really great build up to this final play out on the guitars, and it just doesn't go anywhere. It's just this very, I don't want to say lame, but very generic play out of just this. And that's it. It just plays itself out. It's like, okay, I've done my job here. I'm out. And it just doesn't really lead to anything. So, yeah. If I was disappointed with Prequel, I was very disappointed with this one, if I'm being perfectly honest. And unlike Prequel, which I could see glimmers of hope, and I did eventually warm up to, I don't know if I can say the same thing for this one. There are definitely aspects on this album that I really, really do like, and I do, in some ways, enjoy this direction that the band is currently in. But overall, this album just left me wanting more, and not necessarily in a good way. So yeah, if this is your first time with Ghost, do not start here. I think this gives you the kind of the wrong impression of what the band was going for. Because in my mind, Ghost was this really fun, like haunted house, like Scooby-Doo haunted mansion that was very tongue-in-cheek in terms of the gothic and dark, and it had those elements in it, but at the end of the day, it was just a fun romp. And I feel like that gothic and dark aspect has taken a back seat into this bigger, larger sound, to its detriment. So yeah, Imperium from Ghost was one that I probably won't be returning to anytime soon, and this is coming from a really big Ghost fan. Ultimately, I would say Imperium from Ghost is one that I would ultimately skip. As I mentioned, if you're a fan of the band, go in it knowing this. But if you're new to the band, don't start here. Go to Meliora, which is by far one of their better or best records. Go to their first two albums. Check out Prequel. Like, there are some really good moments on that album. But yeah, Imperia, I think, will be one that's just kind of forgotten in time. I have a feeling, and I might be completely off on left base here, but I have a feeling this is going to be like Metallica's Load and Reload, where the songs take on a new life when they perform it live. So if they put out a live album, kind of like what Metallica did with S&M, if they put a live album with the tracks from this album on it, I think that's going to be a fantastic live album. But as a studio album, it just didn't work for me. So that's about it for Imperium from Ghost. What did you guys think about this album? Did you love it? Did you hate it? Whatever you thought, please let me know by commenting down below. And that's about it. So thank you all so much for watching. As always, you guys are definitely the best. And until next time, notes out.